Now, we've been waiting for it for yonks and yonks, but don't panic because we're told it will finally happen later this month. What am I talking about? David Cameron's long-awaited speech on Europe, of course. The trouble is, where should he give it? The Rose Garden, perhaps? Or is that just a tad passé? Here's our David.
You know what it's like. Big speech to make, but where to go to set the tone? Well, we at the Daily Politics aren't just here for the nasty things in life, like a shocked resignation or disappointing growth figures. We like to help. So I've been selflessly scouring the streets of London, looking for the perfect venue to set out a prime ministerial vision for Europe. If Dave wants to literally throw some red meat to his Eurosceptics, he could come here to Rules. The grub's as British as roast beef and Yorkshire pudding, and they've been feeding Tory MPs for centuries. But of late, he's been cozying up to Angela Merkel, so perhaps coming here to Hermannsey German might not be his worst idea. Only one tube stop away from Westminster. But if he wanted to build a few bridges with France, where better to come than the French house? True, they do serve their beer in French measures, but it does have an upstairs dining room, and it is available for functions. Or, if Dave wants to tell Europe to wake up and smell the coffee, where better than Bar Italia? There is, however, one place the Prime Minister should probably avoid at all costs, no matter how good its venues.
David Thompson reporting there. Well, yesterday, a poll for the Mail on Sunday put the UK Independence Party on 16%, following the party's best ever result in a parliamentary by-election in November. So should the Prime Minister be taking the UKIP threat more seriously?
Given how well they're doing at the moment in the polls, do you regret using fruitcake and closet racist as terms for UKIP?
Look, when you're Prime Minister, you have to get used to the fact that in the middle of a parliament, you're going to have people going off in all sorts of different directions. And you've just got to focus on the job in hand. And people will judge us in 2015.
But they're not fruitcakes, are they?
Well, there are some pretty odd... We won't go into
OK, all right.
Pretty odd people.
All right.
Well, I don't know if he was including Nigel Farage, the leader of the UK Independence Party, but he joins us now. Happy New Year to you. So are you fruitcake loonies and closet racists, or just a little bit odd?
Well, I mean, compared to Cameron, Miliband and Clegg, I'm very odd. I mean, I've got a couple of major confessions. I spent 20 years actually having a job, which, of course, none of those guys have. And I'm in politics out of conviction. I believe in things. I'm not hidebound by political correctness. So by those terms, Mr Cameron, I'm probably pretty odd.
Right, Cheryl Glynn, how would you describe members of UKIP?
I have to say that I will probably rely on my ladylike approach to things and say that I think that they're a bit of a one-issue wonder, mostly.
Well, we're against HS2, which your party's not, and that's why we're getting so many votes in your constituency, isn't it?
And I have to tell you that when it comes to HS2, I'm with you, Nigel.
Well, there you are, you see. There's a new coalition breaking out here,
No, there's
there?
not a new coalition. To be serious, UKIP has grown and has had tremendous success over the past, particularly over the past 12 months. But they have based their party mostly on an anti-European stance, and it's out of Europe, not in Europe. It is completely out of Europe, and to that extent, it has always been a one-issue party. They're now starting to broaden their base a little, and I think you've got to take UKIP seriously. I take UKIP very seriously.
Do you think David Cameron should take them more seriously?
I think all parties should take a party that has grown to 16% in the polls seriously. I think that's how you should treat other political parties.
I mean, Ed Miliband, for example, the day when we had the row in Rotherham over the fostering case, Ed Miliband said, look, I don't agree with UKIP, but it's quite wrong that those children were removed. Michael Gove said very much the same thing. The only person I can see in mainstream politics abusing UKIP on a regular basis is your leader.
Nigel, I think that clip has been taken out of context and played over and over again.
No.
And can I just tell you, I did a proper job. I did a proper job for 20 years, and I've been 20 years in politics, and I didn't get where I am today without being insulted on a regular basis. Right. So I do think you've been playing to the gallery on this one rather too much, quite frankly.
Nigel Farage playing to the gallery, surely that would never happen. I mean, all right, so you've had this 16%, that is pretty impressive for UKIP, but is it still just a protest vote? I mean, are you realistically aiming for Parliament?
You know, we don't just talk about Europe, we talk about the consequences of European Union membership on our lives, on our economy. I mean, I'll give you an example. This year, we're going to campaign very hard on the fact that on the 1st of January next year, we open the doors, not just for work, but for social security, to 29 million people from the very poor countries of Bulgaria and Romania. We think that is irresponsible and wrong, particularly at a time of high youth unemployment. And these are things that are relevant to people's lives.
Right, Lynn Campbell, it's irresponsible.
And they open their borders to the many people of Britain who want to start businesses in these countries. They open their borders to the many people who choose to go and live in Spain rather than living in the United Kingdom.
But with the best will in the world, is it going to be a two-way street in the same way?
It's a two-way street.
No, it
it's
isn't,
a question
Ming.
of course it is.
No, it isn't. For every one
it's a
British
question
worker.
of choice. And if I may say so, if you're concerned about workers from behind what we used to call the Iron Curtain, you should go and look at the entertainment, the hotel industry, and you should look at the food processing industry. If we did not have these people from what were formerly described as Iron Curtain countries working here, then these industries simply would not be able to operate.
I think
so.
They've operated for hundreds of years without an open door policy.
They make a huge contribution.
But the point is, should you be able to
economy.
come on day one from Eastern Europe and claim benefits in this
Hang on,
country?
I don't think you
That's the key.
can come on day one and
Yes,
claim
you can.
benefit.
Not on day one.
No, you can't.
Yes, you can. If you claim you're self-employed seeking work, you qualify for job seekers allowance on day one.
Should that be allowed? If it is the case, and I'm not sure it is.
I would want to check up on the facts on that, but I think that it is important to have a transition period for all these new accession countries. We've got Croatia joining us this year, for example, and in fact the presidency is going to Lithuania in the second half of this year of the European Union. I believe we are stronger together in a form of grouping, but I also believe that there should be a transition period so that you do not have the temptation of people coming in large numbers. After all, the Labour government did get those numbers very badly wrong.
Yes, I mean, when the first wave of immigration came from Eastern Europe, when the open door policy started, that was a problem, wasn't it, to deal with as far as the population here was concerned?
Yes, I mean, I think it was regionally very difficult. I think that there are parts of Kent, for instance, where who did feel the impact of migration.
And Labour got that wrong in terms of not having transitional arrangements.
I also agree, you see, with Ming, that this is a two-way street, and the benefits to our economy and to our service industries. And I remember the days, Nigel, before the free movement, when these service industries found it impossible to recruit. And these are the areas in which we have seen growth over the last 10 or 15 years, because these are young people, mostly aspirational young people who are prepared to come and work here.
If we need foreign workers or skilled workers, that's absolutely fine, and we should welcome them from all over the world, not just from Europe, but on a work permit system, not with the automatic right to settle. That is the argument we're making.
Well, I used to run the work permit scheme in the last Conservative government in the Department for Education and Employment, and when we saw that there was a lot of applications coming from the former Soviet Union, we actually increased our resources and increased the amount of people that were allowed in, because they were the sort of people coming from the former Soviet Union that we wanted in our economy here.
Let's just move on just briefly, though. Nigel Farage, I mean, let's talk about, still didn't answer the question about realistic ambitions for 2015. I mean, how many seats?
Well, it's a series of stages. I mean, the first past the post system is pretty brutal to a party like UKIP, because our support is pretty linear across the country. Clearly, to succeed at Westminster elections, we have to do what the Lib Dems did in the 80s and 90s, where they built up clusters of district and county councillors, and through that they won parliamentary seats. So the May elections for UKIP are a very important stepping stone in our story.
Right, OK, so you don't want to put a number on the amount of seats in Parliament. And
no.
A coalition. I mean, we know you don't want to work with David Cameron, but coalition 2015 with perhaps another leader, not that he says he's going.
Peter Bone, perhaps. Yes.
Is that your suggestion, Ming Campbell?
I've always said I'd do a deal with the devil if it meant we could get a free and fair referendum in this country.
OK, just very quickly, Cherylglyn, what about this speech from David Cameron? I mean, Mark Field, Tory MP, said on this programme it was just fantasy to think that you could repatriate a whole load of powers back from Brussels. That's true, isn't it?
I disagree. I think that there is... the time has come for us to look at the relationship of the United Kingdom with the European Union. I don't want to see particularly an in-out choice, because I don't believe in an empty chair policy in Europe, but I do believe in looking at what we can repatriate in terms of the social legislation, the Home Office legislation, and certainly on things like the Working Time Directive in employment, where I think we should be making those decisions ourselves.
All right.
And I think the time is right, because Europe is examining itself very closely, because it's finding its stability is threatened by what's happened with the euro, and other areas.
Very, very briefly.
Name one country of the other 26 that's willing to enter into these negotiations.
Quite.
Exactly.
Quite.
And the problem is, David
That was
Cameron...
brief. Sorry, so brief. I was slightly taken aback there.
No, but I mean, this is...
The answer is there isn't one.
Right.
This is, you know, our membership of Europe is absolutely crucial to our economy. Don't think we're going to see economic growth if we start destabilising confidence in our role in Europe. And David Cameron is being driven by one thing alone, and that's the requirements of party management. That's not the national interest.
Well, it's going to be interesting to hear what he has to say.